Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Smokin Bulls, the podcast about business, money, and lifestyle. My name's Tyler, and this is
Dave.
And we're here chatting with Fidelity today about the Metaverse. And we're joined by Meghan Chen. Before we get to Meghan Chen, I'd like to introduce everybody to Mike Stinton. Mike is our local representative for Fidelity. He's the district vice president in our Alberta region. Mike's been a great support to Dave and I's business. And Mike, I'll let you take the floor for a moment here, just so you can introduce Meghan properly so I don't mess it up.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate the invitation to join today. I'll be quick so we can turn it over to Meghan right away. But Meghan joined Fidelity in 2018. She has 8 years of industry experience. She has her BCom from McGill University and her MSc in financial economics from Oxford. So along with her CFA designation. So it's a well-rounded way of saying she's extremely intelligent. She's our head of digital assets and everything related to cryptocurrencies and the metaverse, with which Fidelity has launched some recent opportunities. Before joining Fidelity, she was the analyst of private investments at the Canadian Pension Plan. And then she was also an associate at BlackRock Alternatives prior to that. And then with Fidelity, she provides, as I mentioned, the research and development of alternative products, including all digital asset related products, which is incorporating the metaverse also. So thank you again for having me on for this brief moment. But Meghan, thanks for taking the time. Dave and Tyler, I will turn it over to Meghan now and enjoy the podcast.
Thanks, Mike. So we could pull up the slide deck.
Sure thing.
Perfect. So I'm sure by now most of you have heard of the term metaverse. So what is it exactly? I'll give a broad definition. So on the next slide, the metaverse really refers to a network of shared 3D virtual worlds and augmented reality environments that form a sort of extended reality universe. And in this universe, people can be represented by digital avatars and move around in a 3D environment and interact with one another in real time. So the idea is that the metaverse could be the next iteration of online experience. According to Citi, by the year 2030, the metaverse could have 5 billion users, and the total addressable market for the metaverse economy could be between $8 and $13 trillion. So it could certainly become a very big opportunity. And it may become the medium through which we work remotely, attend classes online, shop online, socialize online, etc. So whatever you do online, the metaverse could make it more immersive. So for example, instead of attending Zoom calls all day while remote working, in the metaverse, you can step into a virtual meeting room and feel like you're in the same room as your colleagues and be able to see and interact with one another more naturally as if you're in a real office. So we don't yet know what form the metaverse will eventually take because this is still a very emerging concept. We're certainly very far from having something advanced like the metaverse you may see in the movie Ready Player One. The metaverse right now really consists of a fragmented set of virtual world and augmented reality platforms that have limited capabilities. So there's still a lot of room for development, and this is why there may be investment opportunities, and we'll go into the potential investing landscape a little later on. Next slide, please. So why has interest in the metaverse increased so much lately? So this is due to a confluence of several factors. Although the metaverse definitely isn't just for gaming, a lot of the technology supporting it does come from the gaming industry. Over the past decade, we've seen a rise in games like Fortnite or PUBG that allow many players to interact with one another in a single match. And this is relevant to the metaverse because it allows for many people to share a virtual world environment and interact in real time. And also, advances in gaming have allowed for better graphics and more realistic physics in virtual world experiences. So another key trend is the consumer adoption of virtual reality headsets, which has become much more widespread over the past decade. And VR has become increasingly popular in gaming as well. And this is relevant to the metaverse since it helps make virtual experiences more immersive. And another point is that social events in virtual worlds have also gained traction. Platforms like Fortnite and Roblox have held virtual concerts that have attracted millions of attendees. And COVID has likely played a role in making the metaverse gain mindshare as well, in terms of helping people see the value of having enhanced virtual experiences in general, on the back of the rise in remote work and remote education. Next slide, please. So currently we can think about virtual world platforms in two main camps, centralized and decentralized. Although I will say that this is a bit of a simplification, and in reality, it's more of a spectrum than a binary partition, since there are different extents and aspects of decentralization. So on one hand, platforms like Fortnite, Roblox, or Horizon Worlds are owned and operated by a centralized entity. So these entities have significant control over content and user assets on the platform, as well as the governance of the platform. So how does blockchain technology come into all this? Blockchain technology offers a way to decentralize various aspects of virtual world platforms and to give more control to users and creators. So a notable example is Decentraland. Decentraland, some of you may have heard of it. It's a virtual world platform that leverages the Ethereum blockchain network to keep track of user asset ownership. So ownership of virtual land in Decentraland and in-world items in Decentraland can be bought and sold by users as blockchain tokens called NFTs, which stands for non-fungible token. So what this means is that asset ownership on Decentraland is kept track of via a decentralized network, namely the Ethereum network, as opposed to being kept track of in centralized corporate databases. And Decentraland also uses Ethereum as a basis for its decentralized governance model. So that means instead of having one company governing the whole platform, it is actually the owners of land parcels and the in-world currency in Decentraland who have the right to make and vote on governance proposals. So there are pros and cons to both the more centralized approach versus the more decentralized approach. In terms of the pros for the centralized approach, the organizational structure of centralized platforms generally allow them to be much more efficient in terms of operations and development and execution. These platforms may also have much more resources at hand and be easier to regulate. But on the other hand, decentralized platforms may mitigate censorship concerns arising from one party gatekeeping all the platform content, the way Apple effectively decides which app gets to have an app, which businesses get to have an app on its app store. A decentralized metaverse may also promote better interoperability between platforms, meaning that it might make it easier for a user to move across platforms while retaining their assets and just have a smoother experience and so on. And I think the key point, the key advantage of a decentralized metaverse is that it generally allows for more value accrual to users and creators of the platform relative to a centralized platform. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some of the reasons, some of the investment opportunities behind the metaverse. Next slide, please. So to put some numbers behind the rising interest in the metaverse, this chart shows that over the past couple of years, there has been a significant increase in sales of virtual real estate and digital items on metaverse platforms like Decentraland and the Sandbox. More and more companies are buying land in the metaverse, including well-known brands like JP Morgan, HSBC, Gucci, and Adidas. Next slide, please. So Grayscale estimates that the metaverse will be an annual $1 trillion revenue opportunity going forward. We saw before as well that Citi has put out an estimate that by 2030, the total metaverse economy will be between 8 and 13 trillion. As the potential next iteration of virtual experience, the metaverse could impact many major aspects of our lives. So let's take a look at different aspects of our lives and how the metaverse can add value in each one. So again, the metaverse is a very emerging area, so examples will have to be general and based in part on conjecture. Next slide, please. So first of all, working. Compare, for instance, traditional remote working today versus what remote working could look like in the metaverse. So work meetings in the metaverse could allow for more natural social interactions and better collaboration between colleagues. Colleagues working time zones apart can feel like they are in the same room. And proximity and spatial audio can let people know where they are relative to one another. People can actually look at the person they're talking to, and they can point to features on a shared 3D object and so on. So actually in March 2022, Fidelity Canada held our first Metaverse meeting using a meeting room in Horizon Workrooms, which is a platform that you can access via Meta's VR headset. Next slide, please. So another example is live events. Compare holding events in the metaverse versus virtual events like webinars today, including this one. So it'll allow for a more flexible environment design. So you could design the space of the event to match what the event is about. Audience members could see and interact with one another and the speaker more naturally. And in February 2022, Fidelity Investments hosted a virtual morning brew event in VR using the enterprise metaverse platform Engage VR. Next slide, please. So in terms of education, online learning is on the rise. The number of undergraduates enrolled in online learning increased 93% as a result of the pandemic, and about 60% of colleges and universities actually plan to continue some or all their remote learning offerings even after the pandemic. So remote learning, remote education in the metaverse could allow for a more engaging experience, since students could feel like they're in the same room as their classmates. And in addition, VR or AR technology could expand the horizons of the traditional classroom learning experience. So for example, if you're learning history, you can simulate ancient cities and walk around in them, for example, ancient Rome. If you're learning physics or engineering, you could simulate and build mechanical systems in 3D. In terms of medicine, medical schools could run simulations to train the residents in operating rooms. So you could have residents run through, say, 100 simulations of an operation, complete with rare complications, and do worst case scenario training. And actually, some surgeons are already using AR headsets like Microsoft HoloLens as a tool to plan operations as well as during operations. Next slide, please. So compare online shopping today, say on Amazon, versus what shopping could potentially look like in the metaverse, which could be more interactive and immersive. So customers could pick up and look at a 3D model of an object before buying it. They could potentially be able to try on clothes on photorealistic digital avatars before buying the clothes. They could also use AR to see how furniture looks in rooms before buying it. And customer service could be more personalized as well, as you could chat with store associates in the online store as you would interact with them if you walk into a physical store. And then as well, shops could be arranged in a district, so you could walk around in an immersive 3D environment and discover new shops and new products more naturally and intuitively. And in March, Decentralized actually hosted its inaugural Metaverse Fashion Week. And the event included many retailers that built pop-up stores, including Selfridges, Tommy Hilfiger, Etro, Dolce & Gabbana, and Dundas World. Next slide, please. So watching sports in the metaverse could also be much more immersive than watching sports on TV. The audience could have a panoramic view of the whole game and choose to zoom into any perspective of their choice. Additionally, fans could step into the virtual pitch and even run alongside players, or simply sit with their friends who in the physical world may be many miles away. So overall, through these examples that we've seen across working, learning, shopping, etc., the value add of the metaverse can be making online experiences more like their physical counterparts and or expanding what's possible in general. Next slide, please. So now that we've talked about the potential value add of the metaverse, let's turn to the potential investing landscape. So several industries stand to benefit from the rise of the metaverse, and many technologies may be relevant to further developing the metaverse. So this pie chart doesn't actually represent the target allocation of our fund, the Fidelity Total Metaverse Index Fund, by the way. It's just to show some of the major aspects of the potential investing landscape around this theme. So the first quadrant is sort of supporting digital infrastructure. These are companies like NVIDIA that are making computer chips or powerful GPUs, and potentially content delivery networks, cloud service providers, data center operators, and so on. Right now, the metaverse platforms have quite limited capabilities, an advanced version of the metaverse, a hypothetical advanced version of the metaverse that is massively scaled and allows for complex real-time interactions, would have unprecedented demands in terms of computing power and in terms of bandwidth and in terms of low latency. So in order to support that hypothetical advanced version of the metaverse, we would need to build better digital infrastructure. And so that's what the first quadrant really is. It's companies that would benefit from the rise in the metaverse as they are helping to build out that digital infrastructure. So the second quadrant is content. So these are companies that are engaged in building software for virtual world environments. Gaming companies would be included in this category, as gaming companies develop game engines that actually allow us to realize the physics and the graphics that users see in the complex virtual worlds of video games. Other companies that could fit into that quadrant as well include companies involved in 3D modeling software, design and engineering software, or 3D digitization and space capture software. So basically any software that would allow, that would help that rendering and realization of virtual world environments. Another quadrant is interface. So these are companies that are engaged in developing products that facilitate users access to the metaverse, including VR headsets, AR headsets, and so on. In the future, this category could also include technologies like haptic gloves, which are gloves that will allow you to actually feel what you're interacting with in the metaverse, as well as see it. And the last major category is digital, is economy. So these are companies like digital payments companies that would facilitate payment rails in the digital economy of the metaverse. And this category could also include the cryptocurrency companies, as cryptocurrencies and blockchain tokens like NFTs could potentially come to play a major role in the digital economy of the metaverse. Next slide, please. Okay, so our metaverse, taking a step back and talking a bit about Fidelity's offering. So our Metaverse ETF will leverage Fidelity's capabilities in index design and research expertise. So the index methodology is designed by the Fidelity quant team in the US and is in line with the team's robust thematic index constitution process. This process includes the use of artificial intelligence tools such as natural language processing to identify keywords and scan through company documents like earnings transcripts in order to identify the relevant companies. And this process also benefits from Fidelity's strong fundamental research capabilities as fundamental and thematic analysts review the research process and ongoing outputs. This is an iterative process, and the quant team continue to look for ways to improve and enhance this process as a standalone and as well as an integrated framework. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So that's the end of what I have in terms of prepared remarks, but happy to take any questions.
That was great, Meghan. It's Metaverse is something we've all been hearing about, and so thank you for sharing your knowledge around it. A couple of questions that came to my mind before we even get into any of our viewer questions. You mentioned that there's companies that are buying up land in the metaverse. Is the land finite? Like, is there a limited supply, or is it just they can just buy swaths of land in the metaverse and there's no end in sight?
I guess there's no real theoretical bound, but in practice, virtual world platforms like Decentralized, they have an agreed upon limit to the number of land parcels. So in Decentralized, there's about 90,000 land parcels, and each parcel is, I believe, 16 meters by 16 meters, something like that. And so you could buy contiguous parcels and then build bigger structures. And so companies like JP Morgan, they have bought, and Fidelity as well recently, have bought land parcels on Decentralized as sort of virtual real estate. And they have built a virtual presence there. You could walk in and feel like you're walking into a bank branch in the metaverse. There's not much there right now in terms of actual activity and service provided, but it just goes to show that these companies want to establish their brand in the metaverse.
That's pretty cool. I heard Snoop Dogg bought land in the metaverse, and now there's people trying to buy up land around him because he's there. So I guess that
I had the same question here.
That land is starting to, I guess, increase in value based on what's already there, similar to in the real world where location matters, I guess, in terms of where you buy?
Exactly. Yeah. So Snoop Dogg has bought land in not on Decentralized, but on a competing decentralized metaverse platform called the Sandbox. And yeah, just like in real life and in the physical world, real estate in the metaverse really is highly dependent on location. So not all land parcels are going for the same price. And it really depends on whether or not you're close to, celebrities or close to key central areas, key plazas, for example, key shopping districts and things like that. Land can be monetized in various ways, and this is more of a going forward type of thing, but companies can monetize their land by, for example, selling tickets to live events, to virtual events taking place on their land. They could rent out that land. They could have advertisements on that land. They could build a shop and sell items on that land. So there are just various ways of monetization that they're thinking about going forward, which is why they're paying so much money, I guess, for these pieces of virtual real estate.
And they're buying it decentralized, like JP Morgan and Fidelity, for example, they're buying on the decentralized platform. Yeah.
Yes, so Fidelity and JP Morgan are examples of companies that have bought virtual real estate on the Decentraland platform. And on the Sandbox as well, the Sandbox has plenty of brands that have established presences on there, including Adidas and Gucci and Warner Brothers. I think they bought something on there as well. So lots of brands. You can see a brand map on their website. It has about 200 brands. So quite a bit of interest is being generated.
And so is this more common that the only people who can afford to purchase any of this are entities, corporate entities, people with pretty deep pockets? I mean, the average person with a few Ethereum are not going to be able to walk in and buy a chunk.
I think so. Well, I mean, the average price of a piece of land, an average parcel of land, is about $15,000 to $20,000. So, I mean, it's not completely out of reach for an average retail investor, but it's not that inexpensive.
Yeah. Okay.
I did have one question. You talked about hosting meetings, and that Fidelity did one recently, and it's done in virtual reality. If, let's say, Dave and I wanted to up our game here and start hosting these in the metaverse, would all the attendees then have to attend in the metaverse, or is there another way that they can be involved? So attend it like it's a webinar, the old school way, like we're doing right now, and us actually hosting in a metaverse format. Is that possible? Do the two talk to get to each other, I guess, or?
Yes, great question. So the Metaverse platform that Fidelity has tested, one of them anyway, it's called Horizon Workrooms, which is run by Meta. And in that platform, so the people who have VR headsets can join and be present as digital avatars, but the people who don't have a headset will show up on a screen in the metaverse room. So you'll feel like so let's say you have a headset and you're seeing, say, 10 other people as digital avatars, but then in the corner of the virtual room, you'll also see a screen. And then on that screen, you'll see, say, 10 other colleagues that are joining, and it will look like a Zoom call just on that slice of the room.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. So this is a separate platform. I mean, if we're running our meetings and webinars on Zoom, you're not tying Zoom into the metaverse. You're using platforms that have been created for the metaverse, like you said, like Horizons and Engage and things like this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you've got a few other questions there, Tyler. We've opened it for questions from our participants. So if you've got something, type it in and we'll get it rolling.
Yeah, if there are questions from any of our viewers, if you were familiar with how Zoom works, down at the bottom, I believe there's a Q&A button where you can click on and type out your question. We'll see it pop up on our side, and we'll relay that to Meghan to get her feedback. We do have a number of, I guess, questions here just around the investing in it, because of course it sounds like, like anything that's fledgling, there's a huge opportunity for growth here, Meghan. And I don't know how you actually narrow down. I mean, you went into your wheel there as to how you guys narrow down where to invest in order to take advantage of the potential growth here. The ETF that Fidelity has launched, I know ETFs can be run as a passive position or as an actively managed position. Maybe you mentioned this, I might have missed it, but is it an actively managed ETF? It's
a passive ETF. So it's an index tracking ETF. It's tracking the Fidelity Total Metaverse. Fidelity Canada Metaverse Index, but it is passive. It's an index that's designed by Fidelity's quant team in the US.
Okay, so that's the underlying index.
So, I mean, with that, I mean, technically, I guess it would be somewhat active. If Fidelity's creating the index, they're the ones dictating what's inside the index. So if you're tracking it with an investment in Canada, it's kind of being managed by Fidelity US, and they're adding things onto the index and taking things out of the index technically.
It is the index methodology is publicly available, and it's a systematic process. They do reserve the right, I guess, once a quarter or once a year to review the index methodology and potentially make changes. But there is some qualitative overlay, but in general, it's a systematic index, so it's more passive than active.
Okay. And when did this fund that you have for the Canadian fund launch?
It launched publicly on the 18th of May.
So really quite new.
Yes, quite new.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Metaverse ETFs started to roll in the Canadian retail ETF space, I believe in November 2021. So far on the market, we have CI, besides us, there's CI, Evolve, and Horizons that also have Metaverse-focused ETFs in Canada.
any idea what the total assets under administration for those are?
I don't remember off the top of my head. CI launched quite recently, so as well. So probably Horizons and Evolve probably have more assets so far.
Okay. Just a question from online here. Are there some key tech companies that are currently investing heavily in the metaverse? Example, Microsoft, Amazon, etc. What have they done to create a presence in these areas?
Sure. So Meta is major. I think a misconception is that a lot of the companies that are metaverse related that are going to be in these metaverse ETFs are small companies that no one's ever heard of. But actually, they are largely big tech companies because these are the companies that have the resources. So, for example, Meta has spent $10 billion in 2021 on their metaverse division called Reality Labs. And Meta's I'll give other examples later, but just focusing on Meta for a minute, they actually acquired Oculus, which is a VR headset business all the way back in 2014, and they've been accumulating market share in the VR headset business. They currently have around 80% of the VR headset market if we just look at total sales in 2021. And Meta has also built virtual reality platforms, virtual world platforms. So the main one now, I guess, is Horizon Worlds, which when it was in beta, and now it's now an open beta for users in US and Canada. And that's a virtual world platform where users can go on the platform and create their own world and have that world explored by other users. They also have, so that's their more user-generated content metaverse platform. They also have Horizon Workrooms, which is a more enterprise-focused virtual world platform. So that's the platform that Fidelity used and that I was referring to earlier, where it's kind of like a 3D version of Zoom. So there's Horizon Worlds. They also have Horizon Venues, where people can watch NBA games courtside in VR. Things like that. So that's Meta. They certainly have invested a lot in this space, and they certainly believe very strongly in this space. They are going forward. They are actually thinking of releasing 4 headsets, VR and AR and mixed reality, over the next 2 years, I believe. So they are definitely betting big on the space. We also have companies like Microsoft. So Microsoft owns AltSpace VR, which is a VR platform that's kind of similar, I guess, in a way to Horizon Worlds. Users can create their own virtual spaces. You can have virtual meetings on that platform by AR. They also have AR headsets like Microsoft HoloLens, which is on the more expensive side of the headsets. And they also have, they're also developing something called Microsoft Mesh, which will enable augmented reality working amongst parties that are geographically amongst people that are very far apart geographically. So that's an example of, these are examples of big tech companies that are developing VR platforms and headsets. Apple is rolling out a VR headset imminently as well. And also, if we just look at companies like NVIDIA, for example, they are developing, so NVIDIA has a platform called Omniverse, and that is a metaverse, that's a metaverse platform. It's been called the Metaverse for Engineers. So basically, over about 700 companies now are leveraging this Metaverse for Engineers platform by NVIDIA. Including companies like Lockheed Martin, BMW, Ericsson, and so on. So BMW, for example, is leveraging NVIDIA Omniverse to build a virtual factory. So it's a digital twin of a physical factory, a car factory, full scale with all the AI, with all the workers in there. And they're doing this before they build a physical factory, to work out optimization, cost optimization, and so on. So Ericsson has simulated a digital twin of actual cities in the real world to test their 5G networks. Lockheed Martin is leveraging it to test fire extinguishing cases, of like mapping out wildfire geography and how to optimize fire extinguishing in those situations. So the metaverse is already actually being leveraged by enterprises for various design and research purposes. But yeah, these are examples of companies that are engaging with the metaverse as well. We can think about companies that like NVIDIA. Well, I mentioned NVIDIA, but they're producing computer chips as well. There's also digital infrastructure companies like that are obliquely engaged in the metaverse because they're building out the supporting digital infrastructure that will be required as the metaverse advances. And even companies like Adobe and Snap, they're increasingly engaging in the metaverse as well. Adobe is offering, 3D modeling software that would allow people to design a 3D model and then plug it into a metaverse platform and realize that a design of a 3D model and on the Metaverse platform designed on Adobe. Snap is creating AR glasses and so on. So there are many components that will need to be realized in order to flesh out the metaverse. Many tools and different technologies and different industries will need to come into play. And I think we are seeing that trend where across different technologies and industries, companies are kind of moving in that direction. They're developing products and services that will either enable the metaverse or be used in it, and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you have to assume the metaverse is just another place to live almost. So every company that is in existence in the real world, if you want to call it that, could technically become an existing company inside of the metaverse as well and make their profits there.
Yeah.
Digital version of
just a digital version.
Just
yeah.
like
it's the Matrix,
crypto.
Isn't it, Megan? Is this the Matrix? Is this where we're going?
Well, I guess we would know that we're in the metaverse.
Hopefully.
Yeah, well, I hope so. Or maybe we're in it right now.
Wow. And
exactly.
Just a couple extra questions, more around the social side of things. I mean, is this going to make people's relationships better? Is it going to make them more difficult? Is this going to push some people who would normally go out and hang out with their friends to sit at home? I mean, effectively, with the ability to make money, I mean, short of food and water, you could live in a cubicle in a basement somewhere and live your life and make some money.
Yes. So, I mean, I think the best way to think about it is, well, we already spend a lot of our time online and on staring at our screens every day. I think the global average is around 7 to 8 hours per person per day, just staring at a screen, going on the internet. So I think all the metaverse is trying to do is to make our virtual experiences more immersive, so that we're not necessarily going to increase the total amount of hours spent staring at a screen, but maybe the number of hours that we do spend staring at a screen, it gives us a more enhanced and immersive experience.
Okay, so if you had to, even this is, we're looking down the road, what industries do you think are going to be negatively impacted by the metaverse?
None come to mind, just off the top of my head, because I think it's hard to say, because I think even companies, a lot of tech companies now, a lot of technology companies, they're not just doing one thing. I was actually thinking maybe smartphones might be one thing that might go obsolete with the metaverse. Or not obsolete, but the usage of smartphones might decrease. But then I'm thinking companies like that, they would just adapt. They wouldn't necessarily. So I don't think this would be a death blow to any particular kind of company, because I think the metaverse development will be long enough that they would adapt to whatever is required. But I think the metaverse aims to be very inclusive, because it really is just the next iteration of something we do already and have already, which is basically just everything we do online. So I do struggle to think of anything that would be really negatively impacted by it.
Yeah, I mean, first to my mind was maybe the hospitality industry. I mean, are we spending time social online without going, hanging out at a restaurant or a bar or a nightclub? If we're doing virtual concerts or sporting events, will we maybe not go to those events as much anymore if we can get them in the metaverse?
Perhaps. It's hard to say. It's a question as to whether that would really replace physical experiences like that. It is a possibility. That's a good point. I will say that those companies will probably just end up developing strong presences in the metaverse, so that overall they're not too negatively impacted. For example, like retailers, you could argue that, fashion retailers, for example, might be negatively impacted because of everyone staying at home and buying things buying clothes for the digital avatars instead of buying clothes for themselves. That's true, but these retailers have, like Gucci, for example, they've established digital presences in the metaverse. I think just to hedge against that. And they could leverage what they already have of their existing brand. So, people like Gucci in real life, and Nike is another example. Nike has ventured, and Adidas have ventured into the metaverse as well. People, they already have a very strong brand presence in the physical world, and they're actually thinking of doing this pairing thing where if you buy a pair of Nike sneakers in real life, you'll automatically also have attached to it an NFT that will allow you to own a pair of a digital twin of your actual physical sneakers in the metaverse. So I think it might not be very negative on them. It could be just more of a parallel thing. But hospitality maybe, yeah. It depends on how much the metaverse sucks away time in the real world.
Yeah, I think it was, I mentioned earlier, basically any company that's successful in the physical world technically could then become successful in the metaverse. So if you're good at what you do here, it's, you got to create that experience in the metaverse as well.
So I think mine and Tyler's our robot, our bartender that we're designing, so that when you're hanging out with your friends and you're at a certain restaurant virtually and you hit the button and for $1, your robot shakes up a drink and pours it for you right there. I think we're going to make $1 million for sure.
Yeah.
Good luck to us.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions?
No, we're good.
No? Okay.
How about you?
No, I think I covered off the ones that I had on.
Okay.
Meghan, that was enlightening and a little bit mind warping, but it was great to hear from you and get your input and your takes on this really cool developing piece of, I don't even know if you call it technology, it's just a different way to access the online world.
Sure, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Take care.